Well, welcome to this talk, and it's really quite an important one. And I'm delighted to welcome Mr. John O'Looney he's a funeral director from Milton Keynes Family Funeral Services Limited, real place, real time. John, thanks so much for coming on.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for having me on, John.
Now, we started talking because we've got a mutual concern about these white fibrous clots that are coming out of the circulatory system of many deceased individuals.
Yes.
And you're involved in this embalming process, John. The blood is taken out and replaced with embalming fluid. When did you first notice something?
So really in 2021, about halfway through, we started seeing lots and lots of people who were passing away suddenly, who were a lot younger than those that we were used to. You know, as a funeral director, I've been a funeral director for 18 years. 10 years I spent working for one of the big main funeral providers. The last 8 years I've worked for myself, running my own funeral home. And you kind of get to know, in very much the same way as doctors in general practice, know who should present when at what time of the year and what numbers. And the numbers were very off, and we were seeing, and we continue to see, lots and lots of young sudden deaths, which correlate perfectly, of course, with the humongous amount of excess deaths that we're seeing that nobody seems to want to address.
So these white clots, just to be clear, the first time you can remember seeing them was 2021, not 2020, and never before that.
No, and I've got so in the 18 years that I've been a funeral director, 7 of those years were spent working for the coroner. So my job was body recovery, and I would recover people in all different various states. And whilst I wouldn't know the Latin term for every ligament and nerve, I could tell you what's normal and what isn't normal. And I've got a BIE registered embalmer who works for me full time, who's done 22 years, and he's never seen them before 2021. No.
Mm-hmm. So some people think they've seen some small ones in 2020, but that's not your experience. It's 2021 they started, midway through 2021.
Yes, 100%. Yeah,
and that just happens to correlate with being 6 months after the onset of the some therapeutic intervention or other.
100%. Yeah, that I can tell you. I definitely believe that's what's causing this. And what's most upsetting is not the fact that we're seeing it, because it's become normalised now, but it's the reaction of the people when you raise the alarm and try to raise concerns about it. Nobody's interested. We're getting pretty much the same reaction that Andrew Bridgen, for example, is getting in Westminster.
Right, so you made 2 really good points there, John. First of all, this is something you're still seeing frequently. What kind of the bodies that you are embalming, what sort of frequency are we talking about?
I would say around a quarter of the bodies.
25%?
Yeah, around 25% overall. It's very interesting because as a funeral director, there are 2 types of death. We've got sudden deaths and we've got expected deaths. Where there's a sudden death, quite often those people are given a post-mortem. And during the post-mortem process, obviously the organs are removed. They take blocks and slides, and then they place the organs in a bag, and the bag goes back in the cavity, and it's sewn up. So clearly the embalming process is very different for someone who's been chopped about, for want of a better word. And we have to literally open them up, take those organs out, and manually target the arteries and inside the body cavity of that deceased. And that is where you see them then, because you're at the very core of that person's body. And you can see I've got an example here.
Thank you.
This is a particular sample we took recently from a deceased, and it was taken from the arteries purely because it was an obstruction. We couldn't get the embalming pump in the arteries to put the fluid around their body, and this is why. And it was interesting because I watched what you said a couple of nights ago, the other night, about them being a cast. And they are exactly that. They grow inside the arteries and veins, and they take the exact shape of those arteries and veins. And what I suspect happening is some people, for whatever reason, be that their blood type or what they've been given, perhaps they're reacting in this way, where they're growing this stuff inside them, and it's growing inside their arteries to the point where they're not getting adequate circulation, and they're falling over and they're dying. That's my theory based on what I'm seeing.
And to be clear, you're getting this from the venous circulation and the arterial circulation?
Yes, predominantly, actually, the arterial. As a funeral director, when we embalm, we go in to the arteries and we feed the fluid round the arteries, and then it vacates the body via the venous. So I'm noticing in arteries, and it used to be really only in the veins that you would see the odd clot because it's lower pressure, it's a return system, and there's high pressure in the artery, so you wouldn't normally see it. But the clots that we're seeing are very different to normal clots. They're traditionally like a red jelly clot. You couldn't pick them up, you couldn't hold them, they would fall to bits. You could wash them down a plug hole, for example. These, they're like calamari, they're like rubber, and they're not like
squid.
Yes, I don't know if you've had any samples off anyone. I'll be happy to send you some. They're very tough and very fibrous, and when you look at drugs like heparin, which are traditionally used to thin the blood and break down clots, it's not going to touch these, John. It's a totally different thing.
It's a totally different thing, yeah. So things like heparin will prevent clots from forming. It won't actually dissolve the clots.
No.
But we do have thrombolytic therapy in hospitals, but it breaks down the fibrin.
Yes.
But these are something else. They're like...
I've never seen anything like this. It's very gristly, very rubbery, very tough. I have a great worry that anyone with this, I don't see how they're going to get it out of themselves without it being physically removed, which obviously would be very invasive and a very dodgy thing. You know, you start pulling this out of live patients' aortas, it's a real challenge. You know, it's a real worry.
Yeah. Now, you told me a pretty distressing story this afternoon, being careful to protect confidentiality.
Of course.
We're dealing with a young adult.
Yes.
Who died suddenly.
Yeah, so this gentleman died suddenly. He was given a post-mortem as a direct result. During the post-mortem process, they open the body cavity, they take the organs out, and inevitably they're cut out. They do blocks and slides and tests to try and ascertain the reason this young man died. Then those organs are placed back in a bag, and that bag is put in the body cavity sewn up. The deceased are then released to us as funeral directors. Now, being he was a young man, he had a big social circle, people wanted to see him, so the family asked us to embalm him, and we did so. So you have to open the body cavity up, take the organs out in the bag, and then manually target the severed arteries that you see in and around the body cavity. And these include, for example, the radial arteries in the arm, the femoral arteries in the top of the leg, and you can physically see them like cut straws. Some people have a very large arteries, like kind of as big as my finger. Other people's might be slimmer, like the kind of width of a biro pen, and everything in between. They'll do the same job. And when we've gone to put the embalming nozzle down the artery to pump fluid into that limb, it's obstructed. It's obstructed by a blockage, and my embalmer has called me, and I've gone over and had a look. He's removed this lot, and as he's pulled it out with tweezers, the clot has come out the full length of this young man's leg. The full length, nearly 3 feet long. It initially appears to be very similar to a normal clot, but then when you wash them off and you wash the blood off, they're bright white. And if you don't get all of the blood off, once you place them in formalin, the formalin will burn that blood and they go black. So if you wash them right off properly, they stay bright white. They're not normal, they're not usual. And so we did this, and I emailed my local coroner and kind of said, you know, we've had this young guy in. I know you've looked at him because he's had a post-mortem. I'm really concerned because we're seeing a really strange clots inside him that we haven't seen before. And I sent an email because I wanted a paper trail, John. And usually with my coroner, they're very good. They'll get back to me within the hour. I send an email, sometimes less. Didn't get a reply. So 3 or 4 days later, I received a phone call, and it was from one of the girls in the office who said she spoke to the pathologist. The pathologist wasn't concerned, asked me to dispose of the samples, and actually suggested that it grows inside people regularly post-mortem.
But you know it doesn't. You know it doesn't.
Of course, I worked for the coroner for 7 years. Now, to expect me to believe that when you die, rubber fills your arteries is ridiculous. It's fantasy, and I actually felt quite
insulting.
I felt quite insulted that they would think that I was that stupid. And that was where we left it. And subsequent emails that I've wrote voicing concerns have been totally ignored.
And so they asked you to dispose of the evidence. I mean,
of course.
Plot.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so I wrote to the Chief Coroner of England, because I'm not talking about one death now, I'm talking about dozens, raising concerns.
Dozens of people that have died suddenly, and you find these white rubbery things in their circulation.
That shouldn't be there. I mean, I've got a BIE registered embalmer. He's done 22 years. He says exactly the same. And it's very interesting that the BIE have openly threatened...
It's the British Embalming Association.
Yes, they openly threaten their members with disciplinary action if they raise any concerns, which actually breaks one of their oaths. Oath number 4 is that they will voice concerns if there are any. They're not doing that. They're hiding it totally, and they're actually intimidating their members. So they have a bi-monthly magazine that's released to all of the BIE members, and they've openly mentioned me as a funeral director, warned them not to speak to me, and say if there's any confirmed concerns, they go directly to the lady who runs it, and not to speak out to anyone. Why would you do that? Surely if you see something inside someone that shouldn't be there, and you should voice those concerns. You know, as a funeral director, certainly for me, I have 2 reasons that I would voice concerns. Let me explain. If I go to the hospital, John, and I pick someone up and I bring them back to my place and I roll them over on a tray and they've got a knife sticking out their back or a puncture wound, I have a moral obligation as a decent human to raise that concern. I also have a legal obligation to raise that concern. We're raising these concerns, nobody is listening. And when I emailed the Chief Coroner of England, I CC'd in around 15 or 20 very eminent people that included Professor Dolores Cale, Dr. Tess Laurie, Dr. Stephen Frost, and others, and I didn't get a reply. So I emailed again and said, look, what are you doing about all of these deaths that we're seeing? This isn't right. And I got a 4-word response from his secretary, and it said, we follow government policy. It was kind of the most revealing answer they could have given, an admission without actually admitting anything. So basically they follow government policy. Now, government policy is this: if you die from a thrombosis, it could be a jelly bean in your artery, it could be sawdust, it all comes under the same umbrella term of a thrombosis, a blockage, a thrombolytic blockage. They won't dig any further than that, and the reason for that is government policy.
So you'd reported suspicious... I don't know, no, not suspicious. You'd reported a brand new pathology.
Yes, I reported concerns over a pathology that I've stumbled across, and others. I'm regularly attend groups where there's half a dozen and more embalmers and funeral directors that are seeing it openly, and we're talking about it, and we're documenting it. We're taking samples, we're taking photos, we're trying to raise the alarm, and nobody is listening. They're actively gaslighting people. And this is why we've got record numbers of excess deaths. It's insane.
So you've been insulted and you've been told that we follow government policy?
Yes, by the Chief Coroner of England.
I mean, the coroner system, I as a nurse lecturer, nurse tutor, we used to get the coroner in for every group. And it was a real reassurance. He used to say, well, since the medieval times, we've always had a coroner in the UK, so that basically this is a safeguard. So, John, if someone bumps you off covertly, you know, they're probably not going to get away with it because we've got these coroners here that are the bastions of justice. They're the gatekeepers to the cemetery. And if that system is failing, that would distress me massively, because it's just it goes against everything that I've been teaching for all of my career.
I would suggest that it's not only failing, but it's actively complicit in a cover-up.
Following government policy.
100%, yeah. And I believe that this will go down as a biblical crime.
I mean, we're getting reports of this now from other undertakers I've talked to. The Tom Haviland researcher in the States.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, and I've actually just in the last few days, I won't mention the names because I haven't got their permission yet. But I've been talking to a leading doctor in the UK and a leading medical professor not in the UK, and they are saying that this is a consistent pathology, that this could happen from things that are in the blood, or it could be secreted by the vascular endothelium that's lining the blood vessels. Now, from your experience, do you think that these clots are forming a long time before death, just before death, just after death, a bit of both? Is there any way we can
No,
gauge that?
let me tell you, nothing carries on growing inside your body when you die. Nothing.
Right.
With the exception of perhaps decomposition, as your body begins
Right.
to break down. There's no way on earth these clots form. I would have seen them. I've done 18 years. 7 years of that I worked for the coroner. I've got a BIE registered embalmer. I'm talking, I have had maybe 60, 70 other funeral directors reach out to me. They've even tapped me on the shoulder at the local crematorium and thanked me for raising the alarm.
60 or 70
Yes, yeah.
other funeral directors
within the
have
industry.
seen the same thing.
Mortuary managers, I've had mortuary managers that tell me the thrombosis deaths have gone up 600%.
60 or 70
Yes.
funeral home
Yeah,
directors.
and they're all really frightened because they all work for someone else. And when you realise what's actually going on, and you realise the gravity of the situation, and I've sat with big political figures in Westminster and discussed it openly, and we were told as a group of people, it's above my pay grade, there's nothing I can do about it, and the guy left. It's when you understand the gravity of what's going on, these people are frightened, and I get that. I'm just not frightened.
Yeah, always good to meet a brave man, John.
I've got no choice because I've got a moral compass that won't allow me to be complicit.
Yeah. So you're pretty confident that these are there before death, and obviously,
I believe that they actually cause death. But when you look at when you look at the size of a vessel and you see the percentage of that diameter of that vessel that's blocked, it's clear this doesn't grow overnight. This is a gradual process, and the time scale would support that. I believe that what's happening is we're getting people with an increase in high blood pressure that goes up and up and up, and then heart failure, and they're going to die. And what they've done is very clever because it's actually simulating the most regular natural cause of death: blood clots, strokes, and heart attacks.
Yeah.
Who would be surprised that somebody died from that? But the key is in the numbers and the ages of those people, and the excess death rate, which has been quite well documented. I think 100,000 in the last 12 months.
And of course, that correlates perfectly with the appearance of these white.
100%, yes.
Whatever they are, these white rubbery things that.
Definitely. And I'm just desperate for someone to take us seriously, because otherwise we're going to have a pandemic of heart. Well, it's there now, isn't it?
Well, we are getting, of course, massively more circulatory system deaths, and deaths have been high throughout 2023, 2022. They've been high. They've been high all the time. Yeah. Going back to 2020, what did you notice about the pattern of deaths in 2020, and what's your thinking on the amount of people that actually died from COVID in 2020? Well, where were most of your bodies coming from in 2020?
So there were no more deaths in 2020 than any other year, John. There was a brief blip in March and April for about 3 weeks, and this was at exactly the same time they used up to 1,000% more midazolam. This is the cause, I believe, of the first wave.
And this, of course, is exactly what you see when you look at the graph of excess mortality from our world in data.
Of course.
Peak, in 2020, it's low, then you've got this massive peak, very short-lived, and then it goes down again.
Yes.
And, of course, we've been told that this was caused by the Wuhan wave.
No, it wasn't the Wuhan wave. I was going exclusively to care homes.
Yep.
This was exclusively where they were putting the elderly. And, if they say to you a virus is out there, it's out there in the public domain. It would be hitting everywhere. Why was it exclusively care homes? Because that's where they were exclusively using up to 1,000% more midazolam.
Have you got any evidence of the fact that they were using midazolam, John?
I've seen the vials, or I saw the vials on the sides and discarded in bins where they hadn't cleared up properly. I've spoke to members of staff who openly admit that the district nurse comes, they inject people, and they know they're going to have residents die.
And this is consistent with people from nursing homes that I've been talking to who conducted, well, I wouldn't use the term consultation, but they held their own mobile phone out. The patient was there. The doctor diagnosed COVID. They prescribed end-of-life drugs, midazolam, morphine.
Yeah. The people that weren't even terminally ill.
Yes. Yep. Now, have you any way of knowing that the white thrombi that you're seeing in the patients that are dying at the moment, do we know anything about their COVID status, their vaccination status? Is there anything that would...
Every one of them that I've spoken to has been vaccinated. And I make a point of asking that at the point of arrangement. And because the government was so heavy-handed about insisting we were all vaccinated and kind of insinuated you were a danger if you weren't, these people are all very forthcoming. So I asked them their loved ones' vaccines, and they'll say the same thing, especially with the youngsters where I suspect it is a vaccine death. They're all vaccinated.
Yep. And it's just, what gets me about this is a completely new pathology. Normally, doctors and young researchers are saying, oh, a new idea, and they try to compete with each other to get into the literature first. But here, a completely new pathology is being discovered by people like yourself. And this white thrombi that you pulled out of the femoral artery of this tragic young man, who should be at home now with his kids and his young wife, when you think about it in those human terms, it's simply appalling. He should be going to visit his mum at the weekends. He should, all these things.
100%, yeah, 100%. And the family know, John. They're not silly. They know. Some of them are coming in really angry. Where did they go with that? Because the coroners won't listen. They won't entertain it. The police. I've been to the police station and Thames Valley Police on April the 28th of last year. I went with Mark Sexton, and the incident number was 1068 at Thames Valley, Milton Keynes. Yeah. And I asked to speak to someone in relation. I said I was an undertaker. I run a local funeral home. I said I've got real concerns over a number of deaths that I'm seeing. I really need to speak to someone to voice those concerns. They wouldn't even speak to me. They wouldn't even see me.
This is incredible. You are a gatekeeper of the safety of the entire British public.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
If it somehow gets past the police. And this case, why didn't the pathologist pick this up?
Because they're
not. So this poor dead guy had come to you with this thing in his artery. And the pathologist, well, what we can say for certain is the pathologist hadn't pulled it out because you pulled it out.
Yes. Well, I've been a funeral director, as I've said, 18 years. It's the only time I've ever raised concerns. They're not interested. They don't want to know. And they won't even enter into a discussion. They're actively hiding it. Actively. Why? You would have to ask them. I suspect coercion, probably money and pressure. And how long are you complicit in a crime before you are complicit? Do you know, if you're going to hide something, how long do you hide it before you actually are complicit? So I guess they're in a really awkward position now as the truth slowly comes out, How long are they going to gaslight us for and lie? I really don't know. You'd have to ask them.
Yeah, well, you weren't gaslighted. Your intelligence was insulted.
Of course. I knew. But when you have to have some sort of working relationship, do I start screaming liar? It puts you on the spot, don't it? So I just keep telling people the truth in the hope that good and truth will prevail. And that's my hope. I believe it will.
I mean, let's suppose a patient came in, a body came into you, described as a sudden death, and you found a bullet hole in the back.
Yeah.
That had been missed, let's say. I mean, if you went to the police now in February 2024, do you think they would come around and look at that?
I think it's a really interesting one. To be honest with you, it wouldn't surprise me if they completely turned the other cheek and said no. I've got no faith in the police and no faith in the system at all. And there's talk now of the cremation paperwork being disbanded as well now. That was brought in after the Harold Shipman GP case where he was killing people. They brought in what's called cremation paperwork, and the idea of that was to prevent unlawful deaths going through a cremation process. And they're talking about abandoning that totally. They've already trimmed it down from two doctors to one because of COVID, we were all told. It's generally recognised in the industry. I know when COVID was on, loads of people said it's a great time to do a murder.
Well, I think it still is, to be quite honest, John.
100%. I totally agree.
I mean, let's suppose completely hypothetically we had someone who was going around poisoning people. And it made, let's say it made, I don't know, it made the legs turn orange, say, and you were seeing lots of orange legs, and you went to the police and said, just a minute, I'm seeing lots of orange legs here. This could be because of foul play. I would expect them to be round there like a shot.
Yeah, no, they won't even talk to me. They won't even sit and take a statement off me. They gave me an incident number, 1068, and you could verify this with Mark Sexton because he went there with me.
Yeah. And I will say that you've sent me a lot of photographic evidence, John. It's ambiguous what we can show on YouTube in terms of photographic evidence at the moment,
Yes.
but I have seen it. I give my word that I've
Yeah,
seen
I try and to be honest with you, I'm a guy that cares very much about people, not just about what's going on, but also about their privacy. And do you know, I wouldn't ever send any people have said, "Oh, can we come and film?" No, you can't, because it's not appropriate. But certainly samples of what I've seen and a short video of the clots laying there, I'm more than happy to send. And you know, I'll talk to anyone that listen. Nobody seems to want to talk to me.
Yeah, well, I'm just what's going on in our country now is just incredible. 2020, 2021, you started seeing these. Would you say they got more towards 2022, 2023? Were you seeing more?
Well, I'm seeing less now, although I'm seeing more deaths, and the reason I suspect that is because the coroners, they know that I've been very vocal, and one of the questions they ask families is which funeral director you're using. So I kind of wonder if they then tell the coroner, and I suspect the bodies are probably being cleaned up a little bit before they're released to me. That's my suspicion. I've got no way of proving that, but I'm not finding as many clots as I did, although in the last 2 weeks I found 2 full of them. Yeah. So you know, I know.
Right. Still 20. So the 25% average.
Do you know what?
Is kind of the average figure over the past few years.
It could be one person. That's enough to raise the alarm. You know.
Oh, of course it is.
Why? For example, when you look at schools, they won't serve peanut butter in schools because the odd person has died of anaphylaxis. Yep. We have 100,000 excess deaths.
Just in the past 12
and all
months.
the MPs are going on jollies in Davos.
Yeah. Yeah.
What can't people see?
And laughing and jeering when someone mentions it in Parliament.
Yeah, mocking him and telling him he's going to be dead soon because he's been jabbed and he'll have cancer and die.
And the Prime Minister slams his hand down and categorically says COVID vaccines are safe.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's almost as though we've gone to bed, woke up, and the whole world's become inverted.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, I won't stop shouting. You know, they can come and get me whenever they want, but I won't stop telling the truth, John. Yes, I had a hospice nurse reach out to me in July. Her name's Helen. I'm not going to identify her fully. And she said she's seeing cancers in the under 40s and 50s that she's never seen. So prior to the COVID rollout or the jab rollout, we used to see people would come in, they'd have a cancer story, and that story would be 2, 5, even 10 years long. Now these people are dying in 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks. From being asymptomatic and leading a regular life to death. And this cancer hospice nurse said exactly that. She said they're dying before they even get a single treatment. They're dying before they can even see a consultant to discuss treatment.
And you mentioned that horrible brain tumour, glioblastoma, before.
Glioblastoma, yeah. This is... She's never
very
seen
aggressive brain cancer.
Yes, of course, and these people are dying literally in weeks from being asymptomatic and leading a regular life, and they're only one thing they all have in common: they've been vaccinated.
You know, you're describing what happened to a good friend of mine, John.
Bless him.
Fit and well, dead within 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And on the comments, I'm getting a lot of the same thing. This is resonating with people.
It resonates. They're coming in here really angry, John, because they know now.
Yeah. This can't be hidden for much longer, John.
Well, where do they go with it, though? If you go to the coroner, they just gaslight you. If you go to the police...
You go to the police, they're not interested.
They're not interested. You write to your MP, he'll recommend that you get your next COVID booster.
Yeah.
They're insane.
And they are. I've got letters from MPs all over the country.
Yeah.
I can't publish them because I haven't got permission of the MPs. But you know, the vast majority of them are saying no. We carry on. This is the policy. We follow government policy.
Yeah, they're well paid and they think they've got a seat on the ark.
We follow government policy.
Yeah,
is another way of saying I was just obeying orders.
Yeah, of course. Well, we see
not
what
an excuse. Just obeying orders is not an excuse.
No, and that was never a defence, was it? It didn't work for those in Nuremberg.
Exactly that. Yeah. John, you have our complete admiration and the thanks. I mean, as far as I'm able to, the thanks to the British people. You know, and the fact that our coroner system that safeguarded our well-being since the Middle Ages has now got serious question marks over it, and but we've got guys like you that are shouting out the truth. We really
Well, I
appreciate it.
care very much about other people, and don't get me wrong, I'm aware that I have a family as well. Do you know the fact, the future that these insane genocidal maniacs are shaping for us? And what encourages me is that now, I mean, when I first started speaking 3.5 years ago, everyone said I was mad. I've had members of my own family disown me, you know, and people that I thought were friends, I no longer speak to because I'm the crazy conspiracy theorist. I draw comfort now knowing that people like yourself and other far more intelligent, far more reputable medical professionals are openly discussing it. So I kind of draw strength that surely goodness and truth will prevail. And if we do live in a society where these criminals can be brought to task, they will be. Will that happen? Do you know what? I live now only to testify in the court in Nuremberg, and I hope that happens. You know, I'm going to keep going, I promise you.
And your data, what you've just told me, is completely consistent with the international data collected by Major Tom Haviland. Completely consistent with the undertakers I've talked to, other than yourself and Tom Haviland and his contacts. This is a consistent story that's coming out. Are you concerned for your personal safety, John?
I don't care. If I was bothered about me, I would have never said anything. They can come and get me tomorrow. What's the worst that can happen? It puts me out of my misery, because it's miserable. It's a miserable... do you know what? Knowing what I know when everyone said you were insane, it's really tough. It's a really tough ask. But I think we go through this life, don't we? And we wonder why we're here. I know why I'm here now. And I'm going to keep going. And I'm not frightened of them. I spend a lot of time in the company of death. They know where I am. They can come and get me tomorrow. I could have a car crash or an heart attack or an aggressive cancer. I'm not frightened of them. Let them do their worst.
Yeah.
It's about all of us, isn't it? It's about all of us, not just me.
I've had the police round a couple of times with death threats for me personally. And, you know, I find this actually more concerning than you know, a gang of gunmen walking down the street. You can see that. You know the danger.
Yeah, they don't do it that way now. It's done.
What would be more concerning is a cancer or a blood clot or an undiagnosed pathology or, you know.
Yeah, the weapons of choice are not silenced pistols now anymore, are they? They're toxins, cancers, and but I'm not frightened of them. Let them come and get me. I'm really not frightened, because it's bigger than me. It's more important than me. And if I should die anytime, you know, I want my legacy to be saving others and truth and honesty.
Yep. Yeah, if I can have that on my gravestone, that'll do.
Amen.
Yeah. John, thanks very much, mate. Really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Thank you for your time as well, John.
Yeah, thanks.